After finishing her graduation in the busy city, Zita decided to leave everything behind and move to her uncle's estate in the African countryside. The estate was very old, built during the time of her ancestors. It was surrounded by thick forests, tall grasslands, and small villages where people still followed old traditions. Zita thought she would find peace here, far away from the noise of the city. When she arrived, her uncle welcomed her with open arms. He was a tall man with kind eyes, but carried a heavy silence about him. The house itself was huge, with many rooms, long hallways, and wide courtyards. Yet, even on the first day, Zita felt a strange heaviness in the air, like the walls were watching her. The villagers treated her with respect, but they also acted strangely whenever she mentioned the estate. Some of them avoided her questions, while others quickly changed the topic. A few whispered warnings reached her ears, but she could not understand the meaning. She noticed that people never came near the estate after sunset. On her first night, Zita walked outside to see the stars. The estate looked even larger in the moonlight. The tall trees around it swayed as if moved by invisible hands. The air was cooler than it should have been, and a strange sound came from deep in the forest. It was not the call of an animal. It was something like a drumbeat, soft but steady. When she asked her uncle about it, he only smiled and said, "The forest has its own music, child. You will get used to it." But Zita could not forget the feeling that something unseen was waiting for her in this land, something tied to the estate, her family, and perhaps even her own destiny. As days passed, Zita began to explore more of her uncle's estate. The house was very large, and every hallway seemed to lead to another mystery. Some doors were locked, and whenever she asked her uncle about them, he would gently say, "Those rooms are not for you." His voice was calm, but his eyes looked uneasy, as if he was hiding something. Inside the estate, Zita noticed strange decorations. Wooden masks with sharp features hung on the walls. Their hollow eyes seemed to follow her whenever she passed. Some of the carvings on the walls glowed faintly at night, as if light was trapped inside them. She touched one of the carvings once, and it felt warm, almost alive. The servants in the estate also behaved strangely. During the day, they worked quickly, but when the sun started to set, they became nervous. They hurried to finish their tasks, and many of them refused to walk in certain hallways after dark. Zita asked one of the maids why, but the woman only shook her head and whispered, "Not safe." At night, the atmosphere became heavier. Sometimes Zita would hear faint drumming sounds coming from the forest. Other times, she thought she heard footsteps in the empty corridors. Once, while walking past a mirror, she saw a shadow moving behind her, but when she turned around, no one was there. Her uncle acted as if everything was normal. He told her not to worry and that the estate was simply old, with many noises and secrets. But Zita's heart told her otherwise. Something inside the house was alive. One evening, she noticed a long hallway she had never seen before. At the far end stood a tall door covered in carvings of strange symbols. The door looked ancient and out of place compared to the rest of the house. When she asked her uncle about it, he gave her a stern look and said, "That part of the house is forbidden." Zita walked away, but her curiosity grew stronger. She could not shake the feeling that the forbidden door was connected to the strange energy that surrounded the estate. One afternoon, Zita decided to walk into the nearby village. The estate was surrounded by many small huts, and the people there were friendly but cautious. Children stared at her from a distance, and older villagers greeted her politely, but their eyes held a quiet fear whenever she mentioned her uncle's estate. Zita stopped at a small market where women sold fruits, herbs, and handmade baskets. She tried to make conversation, asking about the forest and the history of the land. At first, people avoided her questions, pretending not to hear. But an old woman with wrinkled skin and sharp eyes finally spoke. She looked at Zita with sadness and whispered, "Child, do not wander outside after sunset. The land you live on is not ordinary. It carries old blood and old spirits." Zita felt uneasy but also curious. She asked the old woman what she meant. The woman leaned closer and said, "Long ago, sacrifices were made on that ground. The estate was built on sacred land where the ancestors called spirits from the forest. They were promised offerings in exchange for wealth and power. Your family still lives there, so the spirits still wait." Before Zita could ask more, a younger villager quickly pulled the old woman away, scolding her for saying too much. The market suddenly grew silent, and everyone avoided Zita's eyes. She felt like an outsider, standing in the middle of a secret that no one wanted to explain. When she returned to the estate, Zita told her uncle about the warning. He laughed lightly, though there was no joy in his voice. "Villagers love their superstitions," he said. "They tell stories to frighten outsiders. Do not listen." But later that night, as Zita sat alone in her room, she remembered the old woman's trembling voice and her words, "The spirits still wait." The drums from the forest began again, louder this time, and Zita wondered if the villagers' fears were not just stories, but warnings she should have taken seriously. Zita's nights at the estate began to grow darker and heavier. Sleep did not bring her rest, it brought her fear. Almost every night, she dreamed of strange shadows moving in circles around a burning fire. The shadows danced and chanted, and sometimes she clearly heard her own name being whispered among them. One night, she woke up gasping, her body covered in sweat. Her window, which she remembered closing, was wide open. A cold wind blew into her room, and she could hear the faint sound of bare feet running down the hallway. She rushed out of bed, but when she looked, the hallway was empty. Only silence remained. Another time, she felt someone standing beside her bed. She opened her eyes slowly and saw a tall figure in the corner of the room. Its face was hidden in darkness, but its eyes glowed faintly like burning coals. She tried to scream, but her voice would not come out. When she finally managed to switch on her lamp, the figure vanished as if it had never been there. The servants avoided her more and more. Some would not even look her in the eyes. When she asked one of the young boys if he ever heard drums or footsteps at night, his face turned pale. He quickly made the sign of protection on his chest and ran away without answering. Zita told her uncle about the nightmares and the strange things she saw. He gave her a long look, then forced a smile. "You are only tired," he said. "The city has left you restless. Soon, you will get used to the quiet here." But his voice was unconvincing, and Zita noticed his hands trembled slightly as he spoke. That night, the dreams returned, stronger than before. The shadows around the fire no longer whispered. They shouted her name, calling her closer. Zita woke up with the taste of smoke in her mouth, even though there was no fire in her room. She began to realize that the estate itself wanted her attention, and perhaps her presence was not welcome. Zita could not resist her growing curiosity about the estate. Every corner seemed to hide a secret, and her dreams only pushed her to search for answers. One evening, while her uncle was away visiting a nearby town, she decided to explore the parts of the house he always told her to avoid. She walked down the long, dim hallway she had noticed before. At the end stood the ancient carved door covered in strange symbols. The air around it felt colder, and her skin prickled as though unseen eyes were watching her. The door was locked, but Zita found a heavy key hanging on the wall nearby. To her surprise, it fit perfectly. Inside, the forbidden wing was nothing like the rest of the estate. Dust covered the floor, and the air smelled of smoke and old blood. The walls were filled with shelves carrying ritual objects, wooden idols with sharp teeth, jars filled with ashes, and animal skulls carefully arranged in patterns. In the center of the room stood a low altar, dark stains marking its surface. Zita's heart pounded as she touched it, realizing the stains were not just from animals. It looked like human blood had been spilled here. As she searched further, she discovered a leather-bound journal hidden under a pile of cloth. Opening it, she saw her uncle's handwriting. The pages described ceremonies, chants, and sacrifices made in honor of ancient spirits. Her uncle had written that the estate was not only a home, it was a shrine built to please the spirits of the forest. Zita dropped the book in shock, her hands trembling. The words were clear: the blood of our family must be given. Without it, the spirits will take what they choose. A sudden sound echoed behind her, a soft whisper, almost like her name. She turned quickly, but the room was empty. Yet, the shadows in the corners seemed thicker, darker, and alive. Zita realized the forbidden wing was not abandoned at all. It was waiting. After discovering the journal, Zita could no longer stay silent. She waited for her uncle to return and then confronted him in the main hall of the estate. At first, he denied everything, insisting that she had misunderstood. But when she held up the journal and read his own words aloud, his face changed. His eyes grew dark and his shoulders sagged as though a heavy secret had finally broken free. With a deep sigh, he admitted the truth. Long ago, their ancestors made a pact with the spirits of the forest. These spirits promised wealth, power, and protection in exchange for blood sacrifices. To keep the estate safe, every generation had to offer one member of the bloodline. That was the price for living on the sacred land. Zita's voice trembled as she asked, "Who is chosen this time?" Her uncle lowered his head. His silence was answer enough. Tears filled her eyes as the realization struck her. She was the chosen one. The strange dreams, the whispers in the night, the drums from the forest, they were all signs that the spirits were calling for her. Her uncle tried to justify it. "Child, this is bigger than us. Without the offering, the spirits will rise in anger. They will not only destroy the estate, but also the villages around us. Many will suffer." His voice cracked as he added, "It is better for one to be taken than for many to perish." But Zita's heart burned with anger and fear. How could her own blood be sacrificed for the sake of land and power? She felt betrayed, trapped in a destiny she never chose. That night, she sat in her room, unable to sleep. The drums from the forest were louder, and the shadows on her walls moved even without light. She knew the final night was coming soon, and the spirits would not wait much longer. For the first time, Zita asked herself a dangerous question. Should she fight the spirits or run from them? The final night arrived with a heavy silence. The air around the estate felt thick, as if even the wind refused to breathe. Zita sat in her room, listening to the distant sound of drums echoing from the forest. This time, they were louder than ever, steady and powerful, like a heartbeat calling her name. When she looked outside, she saw torches glowing in the distance. Figures in masks and robes were gathering near the estate. Their chanting rose with the drums, filling the night with an ancient rhythm that shook her soul. She realized the spirit's followers had come to take her. Her uncle knocked on her door, his face pale and filled with sorrow. "It is time," he whispered. "Do not resist. The spirits have chosen." But Zita shook her head fiercely. "I will not give myself to them," she said, her voice trembling but strong. "I will not be their sacrifice." Her uncle tried to stop her, but she pushed past him and ran through the dark corridors. The estate itself seemed alive, the walls groaning and the shadows stretching to block her path. Whispers filled her ears, calling her name again and again. When she reached the main gates, the masked figures were waiting. Behind them, the forest glowed red, as though fire burned deep within the trees. Out of the smoke, tall shadowy shapes began to rise, the spirits themselves. Their eyes glowed like fire, and their voices roared through the night. Zita's heart pounded. She had two choices: to run into the wilderness and abandon everything, or to face the spirits and break the curse that had haunted her family for generations. Taking a deep breath, she stood tall. "I am not your offering," she shouted into the darkness. "I will not be your prisoner." The spirits screamed, and the ground shook. Whether Zita survived or was taken, no one knew. But in that moment, she chose courage over fear. The estate would never be the same again. And so, Zita's fate remains a mystery. Was she taken by the spirits, or did she fight her way out of the curse? The estate still stands in silence, holding secrets that no one dares to uncover. If you felt the chills in this story, imagine the horrors waiting in the next one. Darker secrets, scarier nights, and mysteries that will haunt your mind. Don't just watch and leave, be part of this journey into the unknown. Backhand index pointing right. Subscribe to my channel right now and join me as we uncover more terrifying stories that you will never forget. Because the next story might be the one that keeps you awake tonight.